Why INFPs suck at marketing, sales, and self-promotion. Truth is, I've always been selling out. The difference is that in the past, I looked like I had integrity because there were no buyers. INFPs have this stereotype of being artistically inclined. I must say that this is borne out by my experience with them as well. Although their career might not be in those things, they'll often find an artistic outlet in the form of hobbies and side projects that they want to make into something more, potentially. Making your way in the world creatively or artistically is notoriously difficult because in order to succeed, you need to balance traits that can sometimes be at odds with each other. You want to be authentic and make things that you are happy with and proud of, but sometimes that can take too long. Spending ages on a passion project only to have basically no one or very few people see it can be quite disheartening. Putting productivity over perfectionism is good for that reason. Also, people are not going to beat a path to your door. You have to seek them out, and you have to be somewhat pushy. Actually, not somewhat, you have to be very pushy. That is not typically an INFP strong suit. They dislike being obtrusive or aggressive in that way, or any way. More than this, when you enter the great capitalistic game of trying to sell things, you will inevitably bump up against situations where you have to compromise your values. This doesn't have to be a complete compromise, but success in almost any form tends to necessitate at least some kind of compromise. It's the price of entry in many respects. That imbalance between authenticity and commercial, corporate, or even just capitalistic success is an archetypical one that INFPs often wrestle with. In simplistic terms, it's a product of the clash between their dominant function and their inferior function. Introverted feeling is individualistic, authentic, and concerned with living in line with their values. Their inferior function of extroverted thinking is organizationally minded, concerned with objective and measurable metrics, standardization, and efficiency. High extroverted thinking users often find it easier to succeed because both the education system and the conventional workplaces are inherently structured and systematic. They kind of have to be that way, otherwise they'd be too unstable. This can make certain types of people, so certain personality types, feel like they are constantly operating from a place of weakness. That can further intensify a sense of alienation that might be brewing beneath the surface to begin with. Perhaps that is one of the reasons why INFPs so often feel like outsiders. Seeking success can also feel innately competitive and zero-sum, which is something that INFPs tend to reject right off the bat. If I were to dish out some unwarranted advice to INFPs, I'd say that success is not necessarily a dirty word. Well, not always, at least. As Mick Jagger once put it, it's not selling out, it's called making lots of money. You don't always have to lose yourself to win. Prioritizing others too much. To love oneself is the beginning of a lifelong romance. Just to clarify, I'm saying that they do this too much, as opposed to sucking at it. I wanted to add this one to push back a bit against the misconception of FI being naturally self-focused and selfish. Because high FI users, such as INFPs, tend to have the opposite problem, where they'll care too much about others at their own expense. I'd say that one of the most insidious and dangerous ways this can appear is getting into an unhealthy relationship with someone, perhaps a person who is deserving of sympathy and empathy, but also has a lot of problems that are difficult to pick apart and resolve. One of the reasons that there is this narrative associated with types like INFPs being very concerned with their own values to the point of being inwardly focused is not because they are selfishly only pursuing those things. Rather, it's because, for various reasons, they have to put those things aside and neglect them. Then eventually, when that goes too far and gets too much for them, they become vocal about it and reassert them. So another message I would say to INFPs is that focusing on yourself is not the same as being selfish, and even if it is, being selfish is often necessary. Self-doubt and imposter syndrome. This one applies to lots of types, and it generally relates to people or types who are slow to take action. It sounds kind of silly to say, but in life, it's often better to start first, then learn later. INFPs can often have this very paradoxical combination of lots of self-doubt and really high standards. It's to the point where if they judge themselves by their own standards, they're always going to feel like they are an imposter. So it can become quite self-defeating. When you try things in life, you often find out that lots of apparent experts or people who have succeeded didn't really know what they were doing, at least not when they started. People like to retrospectively re-engineer their story and narratives to make themselves look like masterminds, but it's very rarely the case. If you're an INFP, then please take action and use your hand to move the cursor to the subscribe button.